we now move into our first panel discussion, focusing on emergency coordination and response in urban crisis. So I'm pleased to welcome our panelists, Eva Karlsen. I hope Eva is here. Yeah. Eva is a chief advisor at the Oslo Region Alliance and has worked extensively on transport, mobility, spatial development and climate and environmental policy, including roles linked to infrastructure, risk and resilience in Norway. Elari Kasemets, thank you, is head of Municipal Police for the city of Tallinn. We know it as Municipal, right? Here locally, leading efforts to maintain public safety and urban order with a strong practical focus on security and effective city response. And please welcome back Esteban Leon, who you already met before, one of the leading international voices on city resilience. And you also know Kristen Guida, so welcome back. I think this is a photo shoot, right? Sorry? Sorry, okay. So okay, the photographer wants me to sit in the middle. I'm used to actually sitting at the edge. Okay, fine. I'm good. Usually moderator is actually there, but okay. Right. I start first question for everyone. So when a major urban crisis hits, what is the first coordination failure you worry about most, and why? Who wants to start with that? Maybe.
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's pretty much always the bottleneck with first appears is the situational awareness. Usually we have not enough information, or otherwise we have a lack of information, too much information. So and it's usually a problem how to react, what we do first. So it's yeah, probably I say that it's the situational awareness.
Is anyone else want to add here?
What was the question?
I'll repeat the question. So when a major urban crisis hits, what is the first coordination failure you worry about the most? What do you worry about the most?
Communication.
Communication.
I mean, it's the main thing is, in many experiences responding to emergencies in different parts of the world, one thing is for sure, the first line of response is at the local level. They always are the first one. They are there. So basically, that's for sure. But how the protocol for communicating to the population and among themselves as well is one of the key issues that I will say it's if it fails, it's really bad. And I can provide some examples that are quite painful, let's say, when that happens. For example, I mean, it's not from the one side the local level. I know municipalities that, for example, the mayor said to their staff, just go home and take care of your families, and then it emptied the whole structure, which was quite painful. But the other is also the messaging, because it's not only about being able to provide a warning message, but also what messages you're going to provide, right? Because you can put a lot of population in trouble when you say, oh, an earthquake is coming. And then everybody starts running like crazy, right? Because you didn't say what to do. So it can be also a failure on communication messaging. I don't want to take that.
No, okay. So Eva, very specific question for you. From a regional alliance perspective, how do you ensure municipalities are not acting as isolated islands during a cross-boundary emergency? Maybe you can just talk a bit about your experience with Oslo Regional Alliance. I'm sure not a lot of people don't know much about it. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I represent the Oslo Region Alliance. That is a strategic political collaboration between 62 municipalities. We have 2.2 million in our population. We do not have emergency response as our main focus, but still, of course, this is an increased attention on emergency response as the society is developing, and also due to climate change. So I think that what is important is to have collaboration where it's a mutual trust between the municipalities, and that they know each other. And in Norway we have a quite good system on response on emergency situations. So I think, but still, you need to have collaboration across the municipalities and over county regions and so on. So I think you need. If you have you need the mutual trust, you need to have the systems and organization who are prepared for an emergency situation.
Esteban, now you obviously worked in many cities and around the world, and we discussed that last night as well. But you know, from your perspective, what do you think? What do cities around the world most often underestimate? You know, before anything happens, and what would you say in your experience? You know, which city is the best prepared?
Underestimate. I'm best prepared. Tough questions. I do think that nobody has an idea of what a bad situation is until you are inside that situation, and you know, when you are, I mean, if you ask me, I used to work in both conflicts and natural disasters, what they call natural disasters that are not natural. But and the reality is that I prefer to work in natural disasters because you see the best of people. People are trying to help each other. In conflicts, you see the worst of people. They are trying to kill each other. So when you respond to a crisis situation in the different parts, you will see that in both cases, the only commonality I found is that they don't realize how bad it can become. And I do remember in Haiti earthquake 2010, we were in the middle of the crisis, and one local authority told me, "I wish I knew how bad it could become," right? And then we were thinking, what if we invite some mayors of other cities to come and be here now and see what is the cost of not being prepared? Because then you realize it's only when you are in the middle of it when you have that issue. You ask a second question, no?
I asked, what do you think is the best prepared in your experience?
Oh, the best.
Most
well,
resilient.
we don't do. London is pushing that. No, we don't do rankings because the reality is that each city is different. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it will be really unfair to say that one city is more prepared than other because they don't have the same reality, not the same economy, not the same social aspects, not the same context, not the same demography, not the same geography. So basically, you know, you are there is no competition. But you do have some cities that put more efforts into building resilience. And I will say there were different movements. At some point, you had the Rockefeller Foundation 100 Resilient Cities working on resilience building. You had the World Bank working on resilience building. You have the UNDRR, the Disaster Risk Reduction UN body, working on that. But this is something that I will let you for thinking. I was the chair of a group of 10 organizations working on resilience. World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, 100 Resilient Cities, the Asian Development Bank, you know, I mean, name it, it was there, UNDP, UNDRR, the Federation of the Red Cross. And we decided to do a mapping of how many cities are we supporting on building resilience, and we didn't arrive to more than 200 in the world, and the concentration on developed countries were quite high. And if you ask me, I don't know if you know how many cities are in the world, but you around 45,000 to 50,000. So 200 is nothing. The impact is really low. And the ones that need most are the poorest of the poor. And in the poorest cities, the ones that need even most are the poorest of the poor. So the poorest neighborhoods. So it will be very unfair for me to say that a city that is very poor with a lot of poor population and an unplanned urbanization process, compare it to London. Or to Stockholm, or to Helsinki, or to, it's unfair.
Okay, but let's talk about practical examples. Kristen, can you maybe bring, you already obviously mentioned a few examples, but can you maybe bring some practical example from real life, from London? What was the situation? How did you respond? What tools did you use?
Oh gosh, yeah. I should say right up front that I'm only kind of very marginally involved in emergency response in the city in London. I am kind of part of response, but for my organization, which of course is not the police, and we're not the fire department. We're not, putting out fires and things like that. But yeah, I think a couple of things I can probably say, going back to sort of the community resilience angle of this, I think one of the things we found, and, going back to your question about, what is the failure that you worry about? And one of them is just about, that kind of lack of useful intelligence, that lack of communication, that kind of, trying to keep the coordination going. We're there to try to help coordinate, activity around this. But we have seen, for example, recent incidents where, for example, the local authority sets up a rest center for the community, but of course that rest center turns out to be unused because it's 3 miles away from where anybody affected by the incident actually turns out to be. We try to deal with that by, getting that community input, getting that sort of real-time situational awareness, through our community networks. And another thing is just trying to think about those worst-case scenarios, trying to think on a more regular basis about what we should be planning for, what could potentially be going wrong, and having, we have someone in our unit who is just that ace at thinking about exercising and thinking about how do we constantly think about how we prepare for various types of incidents, and and what do people do in those scenarios. I come at this from a climate change adaptation perspective because that's my background for a very long time, and for me it's really interesting to think about how we can also apply that sort of longer term lens and planning through uncertainty into some of that. Into the planning that we do, and think about how we deliver that.
But when you do your planning, do you think about sort of future scenarios? Obviously one is climate change, but for example, again, I guess the perspective in London is a little bit different from Tallinn. But we think about defense issues, for example. Is something like that in London also in planning?
Absolutely. And this is kind of an emerging. Thinking about longer term kind of prevention and upstream planning is not new necessarily, and thanks to 100 Resilient Cities, which is what created my post many years ago in the first place, we are able to do a little bit more of that thinking. Yes, and so we're thinking about some of the state threats, for example, and malicious threats and mis and disinformation, for example. But some of the emerging work is happening at the national level in the UK, thinking about chronic risk, and we've just had a chronic risk analysis come out last summer. And that was sort of looking at some of those overarching threats that we see. And so we've been working through my team to try to kind of apply that risk, sort of understand it through the lens of London. How do we understand what, the priority level of those risks? How do we understand how we're actually already working to manage some of those risks through some of the stuff that we do? So for example, if we're talking about income and social inequality, there are policies like, our free school meals programs and things like that are trying to address some of that. And just understand what the measure of all of that is in terms of dealing with resilience. I think the difficulty with it is that while we do have statutory responsibilities for emergency planning and dealing with the crisis that's happening right now or tomorrow, there is no kind of statutory responsibility to be doing that sort of upstream prevention, that kind of thinking about, how do you prevent that risk from, or that hazard from actually becoming a disaster in the first place. And so we're lucky because what we've got in London is that ability to do some of that thinking, to do that coordination, to have a post like mine and my team in place to make the work happen, because you can have all the data, you can have money, you can do all of those kinds of things, but actually just having people dedicated to that work helps to, kind of get the word out and get other people thinking about it and challenge some of the policy assumptions and think and see where the conflicts may be happening, where we might be creating risk, and then thinking about how we monitor that and measure that and deconflict that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Elari, what about Tallinn? Any practical example of, real life example? And how do you generally sort of deal with bottlenecks if something happens?
Yeah, I think that the key words are joint planning, of course. Estonia have a comprehensive approach to crisis from 2007 already, and there is a special legislation in place and so on. So pretty much we know that if something happens, we have like response plans there. We have a really good understanding what kind of agency is the lead agency, what are the roles of other partners, what kind of information exchange protocols are there, and so on. So in the practical level, I can say that it's quite good. The response, of course, there are bottlenecks, and as we discussed earlier, that of course the communication problems and lack of situational awareness, but it's like a daily business to us. But I think that maybe the main thing is to be successful there is the core principles of preparedness. One of them are like a principle of continuity of operations. It means that in Estonia, obviously not in Estonia as well, in everywhere. It means that all the agencies and the individuals they continue to fulfill their own duties, even in the emergency situations. And of course, you have to establish the coordination level, but it means that it doesn't matter if it's a cyber attack or fire or whatever, which are like affecting my business. I know I have to establish it. I have to to prepare for the continuity. So, but if you ask for a practical example, I think the New Year's Eve, when we have a problem with the water flow in Tallinn. Of course, there were several reasons for that, like weather and consumption and things like that. But you can imagine.
For people who don't know, who from other countries, basically parts of Tallinn didn't have any water, lost water, right?
Yeah, for some hours. Yeah.
Or, yeah, like
we get our drinking water in the Lake Ülemiste, and there is this kind of weather conditions called needle ice. Last time it happened, it was like 50 years ago. And of course, if you prepare for crisis, you have this risk assessment, and there is a probability and a cause and so on and so on. Of course, it wasn't in the plans, but it happened. It means that there was a really heavy icing, and we didn't have enough water to cover all the Tallinn because it was a New Year's Eve. Everybody was cooking, taking showers, things like that. So at one time there was lack of water, and of course it needed some kind of response. But it was again the principle of the continuity of your business, because there is a essential service provider, which are a private company. They know that what they have to do, and from our perspective in the city view, we only we just share the crisis communication messages from the company, because there's nothing much to do in the city or in the state level. And of course, but as you said, the communication is really, really critical. So you have to say that, yeah, we have some problems, we are dealing with that, even though at one point we didn't exactly know what's going to happen, if the water's going to run out definitely, or is there some kind of reservoirs left and so on. But yeah, you have to communicate. I don't know. Answer your question.
Yeah, there's actually a question also from public about the war. I mean, I asked about before about events. I mean, the same question for you. I mean, do you actually prepare for war? I mean, it's very serious questions from the audience. But that's obviously a lot of people's mind.
Yeah, we do that. We do that. I think it's good to prepare for the worst, because everything else is nothing according to the worst case scenario. We do prepare for the war in the city level. It means that our responsibilities is the civil defense. You mean all the shelters, and of course the preparing the citizens for the war. Like you have your own emergency stockpiles, and you have to think about your own crisis plan. What you do if you don't have electricity for the next 5 or 7 days, or there's no communications available and things like that. So yeah. Short answer is yes, we do plan.
Thank you. Eva, what about Oslo and the region? Any practical real-life examples of the crisis you had and how you dealt with, and maybe the lessons learned, and for others?
I think I agree with what has been said, that communication is critical, and also how you. I understand it's not my daily work to work with response, but how you meet the citizens and the communication towards the citizens. I think one experience which also has a regional perspective is from the COVID pandemic, and how it was critical to communicate with the citizens on what to do and what not to do, and in particular related to transport, the transport system, that you should not take the bus, you should not take the metro and so on, and to reduce number of people coming into the city center. So that's one example, and also how to behave, of course, to reduce the pandemic. So that's also included, of course, a lot of collaboration between the municipalities, because it was the whole world, not only Oslo, and not only the region, but of course you had to handle the situation local or regional. So that's one example. We also had one landslide in one of the municipalities in our region, and where also you saw that you had to have, I think it was about 10 people who died in that landslide. It happens during the night in December, and then you also had a lot of emergency rescue team coming from the region and also from Sweden to help in this extreme situation. And then of course you have to have good systems. You have to know each other. You have to know where do you find the right entities who are the right people or organizations to do what is needed.
There's actually a question about city services being outsourced to private companies. In Tallinn, example, Tallinn Water, which you mentioned, I think. From your experience in Oslo and Norway, do you also work with private companies, and how does it work well, or any lessons or experience to share there?
I think, as I said, I'm not an expert on this, but I think also private companies is also part of the emergency organization. They have to know who is the right, who has the responsibilities. But it's and in Oslo and in Norway as a whole, I think it's delegated to as low down to the actual agency who are responsible for the different sectors. They are responsible for their own the tasks, and when it comes to response to be prepared for crisis.
Okay, then same here. Actually, same question. I mean, how do you ensure that the private companies are responding well in a crisis?
Yeah, we have to go and look into the legislation. We have an emergency act in Estonia, which says what kind of services are vital. And there's 2 levels. One is the state level, like electricity and fuel and gas and things like that. And the second level is the municipal level. If talking about Tallinn, we are coordinating 3 vital services. Sewer system and drinking water is the one. The second one is central heating, and the third one is accessibility of the roads. So, and it means that there are companies who are providing those vital services. They know that they are vital service providers, which means that according to the legislation, we can put the specific requirements for the service. So, and then for the continuity of the services. So, and that's how we work. We work together. We are planning together. We look over their crisis analysis, risk analysis, things like that. So it's like a joint work and joint planning, although they are private companies.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, I mean, similar, I think in London, a couple of things. Number one is obviously a lot of infrastructure providers are private companies in London or in the UK, some of the critical infrastructure as well. And so they need to be at the table in terms of resilience planning. So as part of the London Resilience Forum, which is the governing body for our kind of emergency preparedness and planning, we do have a utilities sector panel, for example, that brings in a lot of those private sector organizations, whether that's the water utilities or telecoms and power and so forth, just to make sure that they're there as part of that conversation when it comes to governing our resilience practice and also, you know, coming up with those plans and response as well. We've also got, through our kind of community resilience program, we've also got a network of business networks. So effectively working with about 60 networks of business networks. So it's like those wider organizations that can cascade out information about risk. And these are everything from like the Federation of Small Businesses to different business sort of groupings across London. And that effectively exists to try to be sort of a conduit out to businesses in terms of helping them to think about their risks, helping them to build capacity and to meet each other and to be more connected with our statutory responders. Yeah, and you know, effectively thinking about their role in a community as well. So it's like, if could a local business be part of the response in some way? You know, providing rest centers or providing cool space for people when it depending on the kind of crisis we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So have to really involve the private sector as well as others.
Mm-hmm. Talking about engagement, Esteban, maybe. You can also name some more. Do you know some good examples of sort of engaging communities, as partners in resilience across the world? I mean, if you work with different cities.
Interesting question. You have. I mean, it's interesting because at some point we have this discussion about defining community, right? Because we talk a lot about community and everybody's asking, okay, what community? I mean, we are part of the community as well. And the private sector is part of the community and local and national authorities are part of the community. So let's not romanticize the community approach. Let's make it real, right? Practical. And it happened to us, it was a bit of a shock going back to 2010, Haiti. At some point we were thinking, okay, we have to recover from this crisis, crisis, and how do we do? And we were thinking, okay, the best, put this in mind, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, 2010 was the first large urban disaster, right? We never had, I mean, the typical response in the humanitarian setting was, the structure of the response is basic. The local level response first, the national level supports, and when it's overwhelmed, you have the international level responding. So that's how it works, right? Usually the humanitarian response has been always very rural-centric in terms of you put the population that has been affected into one place, you feed them, camps, you feed them, you give them water, you give them, and that was the typical. At some point, when we started with this in Haiti, what is a community response in a city? And we were thinking, oof, this is tough. And that's when we created the neighborhoods approach. We started identifying neighborhoods and talking to the neighborhood leaders or representatives and trying to make sure that the neighborhood was going to be the one that will be represented, because the neighborhoods were also completely different from one part or the other in the city. Must be the same in London, right? You have some neighborhoods that are more, inequalities in neighborhoods as well, in addition to inequalities in the city. So that was an interesting response. Then we saw the structural assessments, because you had some neighborhoods that had the structures that were, buildings, strong buildings, some others that had weaker housing, and also the dimensions, because I remember that the response community came with shelters that were I don't know if you know about the sphere standards. You have some standards for responding, and in housing or shelter, the sphere standard says that for a 5-person family, you have to have 13 square meters shelter. That's the basic, the minimum. But when we were looking at the plots, we had 11 square meter plots. So most of the shelter response was kind of tricky, because they were coming with shelters that were bigger than the place where you have to put them. So, I mean, all of these had quite a lot of component of discussions and multi-stakeholder negotiations and responding to that. So I do think that yeah, it's very diverse, but definitely on the community participation, we have to be as inclusive as possible, the best, I will say, because you do have. I mean, let's not think that the community, when we are talking about community, we are talking about only the majority of the people, but we are also talking about these companies that are providing services to the city should be sitting there. And they have the obligation to open their information, because you cannot plan without that. And that was something that we learned with negotiating with cities, and we were saying, okay, if you want us to measure and diagnose your situation as a city, you have to talk to your service providers and make sure that they can provide us enough information for us to tell you what the situation is, which is tricky.
Did you want to add?
Yeah, well, just in terms of community resilience, it's an interesting question. I think you raised that question about, like, what is a community and what is community resilience? It can be a really fuzzy kind of topic. It sounds like a really good thing, but what does it actually mean? And I think what we've tried to do in London is learn from past incidents and emergencies, and we have the inquiry reports from things like the Grenfell Tower fire, for example, and the Manchester Arena attack, for example. And I think one of the things that we're always finding is that first of all, there's a lack of connection between communities and between those statutory responders. Not a surprise, this comes up all the time, and it's really a matter of, just people not being part of that emergency response, and that person-centered approach that we all talk about not being kind of a reality on the ground. And so we thought about this a little bit, and so rather than kind of trying to define community resilience, we tried to decide, so what is it we're actually trying to achieve here? So it comes down to 3 things. One is to try to make the connections between communities and those statutory responders. So by providing funding programs and providing opportunities for networking so that they can actually connect, and and that saying that we have is make friends before you need them, because that way when you know each other, you understand how to work better together. The second thing is to provide the kinds of practical tools and resources and guidance and things that communities can use, whether through the voluntary and community sector organizations. But it's things like toolkits, it's things like guidance, it's things like support and funding to create emergency plans and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And the third major thing is really about working with our statutory responders, our police, fire, ambulance, and so forth, to help them understand better how to work with communities. Because this isn't just about communities changing their behavior, this is about actually how does the system change its behavior to make sure that people and lived experience are really part of what we're doing here. And I think that's kind of that. So when we think about what is it we're trying to provide, what is it we're trying to do, that's kind of how we define it. We start to say it's about building those connections and building capacity.
Thank you. Let's take questions from the public now. Any hands? Yeah, so.
Thank you. How does responsible political leadership in urban crisis look like? any key elements or observations?
Political leadership.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone wants to answer that. Maybe
I don't want to answer that.
there is actually on the same token.
Okay, but
Sorry.
kidding aside, of course, politicians are those who make the decisions and to be honest, who give the money as well. So the political level is always really important one. But again, I come back for the resilience planning. It means that we have to plan that way. That of course the politicians are showing the way and giving the money, but in other level that if we plan for emergencies, we have to do it that way that our plans are how would you say that?
Properly prepared?
Properly prepared or politicians safe. Let's say that way.
On the same on the same token, there's a specific question here. In Japan, during the disaster, the local head, mayor, moves into the disaster area with family to speed up the process. What do you think about this approach? Would you expect the local mayor to do that?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, yeah. It's hard to say it's a good idea or a bad idea. Of course, in some level it shows support and the real concern and things like that. But luckily for Estonia, if you talk about the crisis management and preparing for the war, I think everybody is pretty much in the same page. Of course, there are some differences between the politician parties and so on, but generally, they're in the same page. Everybody knows that preparing for the worst is essential, and we have to do that. So luckily for us, anyway, in the municipal level, I don't see that it's a big problem right now. Anyway,
when Boris Johnson was the mayor, he would have surely done that. Maybe not with his family, but
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there is always that. I think that kind of thing that happens. I think, but what I would probably say in terms of political leadership, I mean, first of all, well, in London, the mayor is a Category 1 responder, so that means that he has under the law certain responsibilities, and that means that we need to, do risk assessment. For example, we have to have those risk assessments. We need to come up with plans to manage the risks that we find in the risk assessment. And we also have responsibilities around communication. And so I think, it might be slightly naive to say this, but I mean, I think what we can do as that kind of convening body and having those responsibilities is just try to make sure that we have the best evidence as possible, which means that our situational awareness is as good as it can be. We have a whole situational awareness program and team. We can make sure that the planning and the preparation for incidents is the best it possibly can be. We can do what we can to represent our city to national government and also communicate to the public in a way that is transparent and open and honest. And I think that's, those are some of the things that we can potentially do to show leadership as a city.
Thank you. Esteban, and then Eva.
In the program, what we ask is two focal points. One is the mayor, the political level, because they do the most advocacy. I mean, you have to make sure that the political level is backing up in the whole thing. And the second one is a technical focal point, which is going to open the doors of the municipality for information, data and information. And that's key because, the politicians or the mayor comes and go, but the technical level remains. So it's important to build that capacity at the technical level to make sure that sustains the whole process of resilience. If I may, I will say resilience is very much like you putting yourself in healthy and good shape. If you go to the gym once, you are not, the super sports person. You have to continue doing it. In resilience is the same. You cannot just do it once and believe that your city is resilient. You have to constantly work on that. And I want to mention this because I kept thinking about this community thing. One of the key messages is that population or I don't want to call it victims, but population that has passed through a crisis situation we should take them as assets, right? And not make the mistake of take them as liabilities. I mean, they are assets. And if I go back to the reconstruction process, we proved that 80% of the reconstruction process is done by the same community that has been affected. It's not international level, it's not even national level, it's self-reconstruction processes. And that is something that we cannot underestimate. And at some point we tried to, I was developing a tool for measuring impact. And the reality is that the impact of the international level in some responses is minimum in comparison with the reconstruction process that happens from the community level. So that's something that we have to make sure that we build rather than respond.
Thank you, Eva.
Just to comment on that about political leadership. The mayor is, of course, a very central person in a crisis situation, and also when he or she is the one who is meeting the citizens and should be communicating very clear about what is the actual situation, and also be able to take unpopular decisions and motivate the citizens to follow these unpopular decisions, and that's a tough communication task. But that demands that the mayor has the necessary information and that the preparedness plan and everything is in place, and that you have the administration has done its work so you have the emergency preparedness plan or strategy that you can that the mayor or that has the competence and strength to show leadership.
Thank you. There's also another very specific question about communication or how to reach the communities, is that are influencers and opinion leaders with large following included in some emergency communication agendas? From your experience, do you use influencers? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, I mean, a lot of the work we do, like I said, we work through voluntary and community and faith sector organizations, because the principle for us is trusted voices, people who are trusted within their communities. We don't do a lot of, I mean, just as a team, we don't do a lot of communicating directly with the public, although the mayor does. But we work through the people who are trusted by their communities, and that's incredibly important if we want to get people messages out and yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe we work with them. Maybe not so much for the influencers per se, but they are really well-known faces and people. And of course, because if you can put the right information out there through different channels, it's a good thing. So then you can control the messages and the narrative. So yeah, of course, we have to do that nowadays anyway.
And a final question for everyone, because that came up quite often here, got written on Slido as well. Are there any sort of tools or programs or kind of platforms you use to share knowledge across the cities, across the world, sort of, so that others would know about your stories and experiences? And obviously here we, meet and we share those, but on a sort of daily basis, are there any good platforms? I think we discussed that with you, Eva, last night as well, or was it with you, Esteban? But can you name some?
The city of Oslo is working internationally in different organizations, Eurocities, C40 and others, to share experience together with many of other cities here and internationally. So it's a quite main focus for our government mayor and also the administration to work internationally. I would also like to mention that we are a partner in a project, Geo for Water, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And that's a pilot in the European data space for smart communities. And what we want to do in that project is to develop a data space focusing on extreme weather so that administration, the cities are prepared and develop services, so they are prepared to meet extreme weather and water-related events. So that's also that will also enable the cities to have tools and services to improve their to be more prepared.
Thank you, Esteban.
Well, there are lots of networks now. I must say, I mean, I'm glad, and I will say it here. I'm glad to tell you that when we started this movement 20 years ago, I know I look like a baby, but but we started long ago. We put the Making Cities Resilience campaign. I don't know if you know, from 2010 to 2020. But at that time, nobody spoke about resilience. I mean, it was still not a word that was or an approach that was very much mentioned. It was much more risk reduction and also in climate change adaptation and mitigation. But now resilience is coming strong and strong. I'm glad for that, because I remember that this project I mentioned in Tijuana was 2007. And the resilience part was not catching. In 2010, we launched the Making Cities Resilience campaign. That was 10 years of the campaign. And that transformed itself into Making Cities Resilience 2030, trying to go to the horizon of the SDGs, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, the climate change, Paris Agreement, everything going to 2030, right? So you have that one, but you also have a nice movement of different organizations that change. For example, the 100 Resilient Cities switched to the City Resilience Network. C40 has a lot of platforms for working on that as well. UCLG has another. We have the Urban Resilience Hub. I mean, there is a lot of movement, which is fantastic, because, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, that shows that cities are starting to take, action, and realizing that actually you can learn a lot from your peers and not always look up to the national level, but look to the city-to-city cooperation. And that's something that we are happy to promote, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you. Kristen.
Yeah, cities are really where it's at, definitely, I think. And the C40 Cities Network is mentioned. Our mayor is the chair of the C40 Cities Network, so we have to mention that. But the Resilient Cities Network, yeah, which used to be the 100 Resilient Cities, we work so much with them, and we're big believers in sharing and stealing ideas and approaches where necessary, so that we're not all reinventing the wheel. And sometimes we even create some of our own networks where we don't see them. So we've been creating a network across the UK of community resilience leads, people doing that kind of work around working with communities. And we've also started to bring in community leaders and approaches from other cities and countries and towns as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Elari.
Yeah, Tallinn is a part of UBC Safe Cities network, also AFUS. We have several projects like Pakte Suur and Pakte Suur 2, where we are like sharing our knowledge. And last year we established Baltic Capitals Civil Defense Network. And to be honest, the next work session is here in Tallinn next week. Also, the Baltic Sea Forum held in Tallinn this year is the main idea. There is also building resilience. So, and then things like that, and of course, and we are working together with several Ukrainian cities. It's really hard to say, but we can learn from them what's really happening and how we can more and more prepare. So yeah, the networks and things like that.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Elari. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Esteban. And now we will break for lunch. The lunch will be served on a second floor. My colleagues here will guide you there if you cannot find it outside. And we'll continue lunch until 1:30. And so we'll gather here, resume the program here in the hall again. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.